Blake, what is today?
Toby, it's Juneteenth, bro.
Welcome to the Church Gear Podcast, where we pull the tech out of the booth and onto the stage to share the most outlandish stories and hidden wisdom from the tech trenches. And now, here are your hosts.
I'm your host, Blake Hodges, a man who is still trying to teach my boss the true meaning of Juneteenth, and I'm here with my co-host who's trying to hijack the holiday for his own personal gain, Toby Walters.
Okay, and I feel like our audience is going to be a little confused because this isn't coming out on June 19th.
It's entirely possible it's coming out in September.
Which is not necessarily surprising to our audience. They know how stupid we are, and so it kind of tracks. But Blake, there's somebody's birthday is on June 19th.
Yeah, is it AJ?
Dang it is AJ's birthday too. AJ, I love you, man, and I'm so glad we share a birthday, and I'm so glad I don't share a birthday with this nonsense king next to me.
Well, yeah, because then we'd be brothers. That'd be weird.
But yes, June 19th is also my birthday, Blake. Do you know how old I am? I'm sure you can guess very close.
Well, by your bedtime, you're 75. By your actions, you are 11. So if we do the average, I'm going to say 44.
You're darn close. I'm 45 now.
Oh, gosh, you're old.
I know. I leveled up. So I'm wondering, now, have you ever done like you go online and you say like, when will I die, so to speak? Like it'll calculate
what the freaking
length
crap
of your life, and you put in like health markers, personal things, family history, and it will spit out a kind of estimation on how long you're going to live. Blake, what do you think the estimation for you would be?
Oh, it'd probably say you died 2 days ago.
You are the walking dead currently. So for me, it usually says, because I do have longevity in my family history and I don't smoke and I don't drink very often, I usually get something like around like early 90s is when I will pass away and go see our Lord Jesus. And so
You hope.
To think, I very much hope. Yes. And so, being 45, I'm very much getting to the very middle point of my life, assuming that I do pass away in my early 90s, which is still quite possible. I will pass away earlier than that.
Man, this is so dark as an opener to a podcast. Toby, it's Monday morning for people. They don't need to be reminded of their mortality.
So let's lighten up the mood. Blake, it is my birthday, and you came in and you handed me a present.
A big present.
It's actually pretty small, but it's a very big value and awesomeness.
Yes, so we are now officially sponsored by 64 Audio.
And I have this, so I haven't had in-ears made for myself in like 11 or 12 years. And I think that the company was called Alien Ears back then. I don't know if they even exist anymore. And I remember getting the ears and putting them in, and they were okay. They were slightly uncomfortable. And the case they came in was pretty cheesy. And then you handed me this. It's like a
metal hockey puck, soon to be murder weapon.
Yeah, this thing is legit that these ears came in. And Blake, you tried them on a few days ago for our Zoom meeting.
It took me a full week and a half to make them fit in my ears correctly. I was like, man, these hurt so bad, but I'm just user error.
It was so cute to watch you like put them in completely wrong and then complain that they were uncomfortable.
When I pulled them out, Toby, the amount of earwax that came out of my ear, it was insane.
Do you think that's the in-ear's fault, or maybe that's on you?
I think that's my ears, bro.
Aren't you married to a nurse as well? Can't she help you take care of that?
Nursing professor now, because she doesn't want to deal with that crap. Also, I say it a lot. You can't pay to be on the Church Gear podcast, and that's still true. They didn't pay. They gave us some free in-ears.
They gave us free in-ears.
So they didn't pay.
Yeah. What else could we get to give us free stuff to sponsor the podcast?
I want a line array for my at-home TV. I want soundscape in my basement.
Soundscape in your basement. I'm sure your basement is perfectly acoustically set up to handle soundscape as well.
Well, I live in a townhome connected to another home, so it'd be great.
Do you think Ferrari would sponsor us? Because I'd really like a Ferrari, and I don't foresee any other way in which I'm going to obtain a Ferrari other than they just give me one.
Sure. A girl can dream, as they say.
Yeah.
And speaking of a girl that can dream, the audio ministry lead at Red Rocks Church, according to his Facebook profile pic, the original Terminator, Jesse O'Brien. Jesse, welcome to the Church Gear Podcast.
Hi, guys. How's it going?
Great.
Hey, this, just so you know, I'm wearing a 64 Audio shirt, and this was not planned. They didn't call me ahead of time like, hey, so you kind of need to wear some 64 Audio swag. They're just a good company.
Yeah. My ears are big fans of 64 Audio at this current juncture.
You have big ears, so they're by default,
yes.
Big fans.
Amen.
Jesse, if you could be sponsored by any company in the world that would give you free stuff, who would you choose?
What you guys were talking about was kind of right on par with my list. I mean, Ferrari would be nice. An L-acoustics rig in the living room would also be pretty clutch.
What if you had L-acoustics in the living room and soundscape down in the basement?
I would die a happy man.
You'd never leave.
Would your wife be stoked, or would she be like, "This is insane"?
It could be the end of our marriage, but you know what? I'd have an L-acoustics rig in my living room and a soundscape in my basement.
Yeah.
L-acoustics, if that's not an endorsement, I don't know what is. Ending marriages.
Love you, babe.
All right.
And does anybody else refer to you as the Terminator based on your profile picture?
No. I was going to bring these glasses today, but I thought it's
kind of your signature look.
Yeah, I know. But everywhere I go, I never wear them because I'm always inside, and it's not that bright inside.
And it's funny,
and they're like deep, polarized, dark. I literally can't see anything when I'm inside with those things.
And Blake, I met Jesse for the first time in person at the Amplio after party after Philo, and he comes up and he introduces himself, and I'm like, "Who are you?" And then he explains who he is, and I'm like, "Oh, that's because you're not wearing your Terminator glasses." So it's very much his signature look.
Oh, yeah. I now realize why he doesn't look like I thought he did.
Yeah.
Also, Toby, your right side on your in-ears, the cord is all janky.
Well,
you need to feed it back into your shirt a little more.
Calm down, princess.
I'm just trying to make us look good,
Is this your first day? First day with the in-ears?
This is our first podcast with them, yes.
So, and also we don't have headphone extension cables yet. So we are both sitting very close to our headphone amp.
Which we had to elevate with two little drums, which there is a disgusting pink goo coming out of one of them. I don't know what the freaking crap that is. It looks like a patty for like a kid, like a thing I'd feed my cats.
It's, Jesse, what do you call those things that you put on the drum heads? They're the little sticky goo.
Oh, the gels.
Yeah, the gels. And this one is just...
Sticky hands work just as well, and they're about just 100% or 1/100th of the fraction of the cost.
Yeah.
Toby, you should touch it.
Pro tip.
Blake, I don't want to touch it. I know exactly what it is. It's just been on there for years, so it's disintegrated a bit. Can you calm down enough to start these 5 truths and a lie at this point?
Number 1 on 5 Truths and a Lie, where me and Toby are competing all year against the guests, and right now it's pretty even, I think. Number 1, I love mountain biking.
He looks like a man that could bike a mountain.
He does have a big beard. Number 2, I'm decent with a soldering iron.
Okay, I'm calling that one now.
Okay.
I'm going to say that
That's
he's terrible with a soldering iron, but keep going.
Well, I
locked mine in early, so you can have the rest.
That's the murder weapon he used back in that cover up in 95 with me, so I know he can use it.
Okay.
Number 3, I worked at a commercial recording studio for 15 years. I'm very good remembering lyrics of songs I record. Number 5, I once was a wedding photographer. Number 6, haven't we all?
If you pull out your iPhone at a wedding and take some pictures, does that not qualify?
No,
okay.
I think you also have to have the mother or the bride chew you out. Number 6, I don't own a home studio or stereo.
Home stereo. Is that because he doesn't have his L-acoustics rig?
That's because he's married. I'm gonna say he's not very good at remembering lyrics of songs he records because I think he is gonna. Most people like to down on themselves, and that's kind of a down on himself.
Okay.
So you've got with this. We're locking in earlier than we've ever done before. So I've got he's not good at remembering the lyrics, and Toby, you have
that he is. I'm saying he's not decent with a soldering iron.
Do you want to do whoever loses has to eat the pink goo on the drum?
Sure, let's do it.
I take that back.
High stakes. High stakes.
All right, Jesse, what's the lie? Did either of us get it right?
The lie is I am not good at remembering lyrics. Most of the time I don't even know what they're saying, what they're singing about.
Toby?
And I'll record like the whole thing, do all the overdubs. I'm like, I have no idea what they're talking about.
Okay, I got my bag of chips.
No,
here.
that's disgusting.
So,
Stop it.
I can put the pink goo on a chip.
All right. Are you for real?
No, I'm not for real.
Toby,
it's my birthday, Blake.
He's gonna scoop it like cheese.
I mean, that looks like brain matter.
Yeah, it could pass for queso.
Should we cut all this? Did we just degrade the value of our gear by saying there's this pink goo on this drum head?
It's a gel, and gels are very common on drum heads, and you just wipe it off. It's pretty simple, Blake.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So, Jesse, you are decent with a soldering iron, but are you not great, but you're not terrible?
Well, yeah, I mean, when it comes to like cables and stuff like that, all day long. In fact, you guys are talking about headphone extensions. I made my own, and I even have a little like clip, so you can clip it wherever it needs to go. It's pretty slick.
Okay,
But
help me
when it
out
comes to, like-
because headphone extension cables have been the bane of my existence, my entire life. They're the one cable that I feel like always break. Is this true for you?
It is. So here's a little like insider thing about those. The problem is the 3.5 millimeter female jack. There isn't a third party one that's like super solid, super amazing. They're all pretty kind of chintzy and they all break down and I've literally scoured the internets to try to find a better female 1/8" connector, and they don't exist. You could heat shrink them, solder them real well, and they just break down over time.
Usually when you scour the internet, you can find whatever you want, but not in this case.
Oh, believe me, the trails I went on to find these.
It's almost like
I can't
64
say.
Audio should create a better 1/8" female adapter. Come on,
They should.
64.
Seriously, and braid it.
Yeah.
Like that would be amazing.
Yeah. All right. So bringing Blake back into this podcast because you were snoozing over the last minute on this conversation, Blake. Which one do you want to ask about now?
I just want to get right down to the the commercial recording studio for 15 years. You got any crazy stories that came out of this 15 years that we need to hit before we move on to your questions?
Oh man, yes, but I don't know if much of them are appropriate.
Oh, we love inappropriate stuff on the Church Gear podcast. There's no rules here.
Always edit it out.
No laws when you're drinking White Claws.
Yeah, so here's kind of a fun one. So I was recording this band, and believe it or not, I went through a period in the recording studio, like a 3-4 year period, where I did a whole bunch of Norteña bands, which is like accordion. It's Norteña is like music of the North, is what it translates to. So northern Mexico, which is very highly associated with Mexican mafia gang activity, right? And you wouldn't hear it, you wouldn't know as an American listening to it because it's very like, it's accordion and it's kind of kind of vibe, but it is very associated with gang stuff. So I'm recording this band and they come in and, it's pretty normal recording session, but then they're like, hey, so we want to take some pictures and we have some guns. Is it okay if we bring them in? I'm like, it's not the first time this has been asked, funny enough.
Wait. Where are you at in the country when you're doing this?
Denver, Colorado. Right here.
Okay, continue.
Yeah. So I'm like, yeah, sure. As long as they're not loaded, whatever. So they're super respectful and they're super nice guys. So they bring in this box and it's like a clothing box. It's like a big, tall box. And I'm actually recording tuba on the other side of the studio. And over this side is kind of the other tracking area. And I see in the corner of my eye, they start pulling these guns out. And they're like sawed off shotguns. Ooh. And then with like the barrel clip, like highly illegal weapons. Like for sure, automatic. And I'm like, oh, like real weapons. But they were nice and they were, I was like, so I was kind of piqued my interest of like, oh, those weapons. And they're like, you want to take a picture? I was like, all right, sure. So I have a picture that I posted on MySpace, funny enough.
Wow.
Which was real questionable now that I think of it. I have a picture with me and like 6 of these, Norteña band members all holding like automatic rifles in the studio. And so that was a fun story.
Yeah.
I smartly took it down though, because, and in hindsight, I was like, oh, there's probably some blood on these guns that I don't really want to know about.
Yeah.
So how many people did you shoot that night?
Oh, just, the necessary amount, but no more.
Oh my goodness.
And is that pretty similar to a typical Red Rocks tracking day as well?
Yeah. Especially when Tyler isn't hitting his notes.
Mm-hmm.
Is it bad?
Corey.
Is it bad that I was hoping that like someone was going to shoot their foot on accident. Like I thought
I think it is bad.
that it didn't happen.
They did unload everything. So thank the Lord for that.
Yeah. All right, Jesse. So we were all recently at Philo, and you taught there. Can you tell us a little bit about your class, what you're teaching on, the subject matter?
Yeah. So I was there teaching on how to record a impactful and moving worship album.
Step
More
one,
on the
illegal
technical side of,
weapons.
yeah. Unload your weapons
Yeah.
before you bring them in the building. Step one. Yeah. So that was it. Just kind of things to think about and how to prep for it and how to prepare yourself and your church for a successful recording.
Yeah. Were there any like aha moments for the audience that was really impactful?
I think so. I hope so. I think the aha moments came from, the thing that I am pretty open about is I don't like to hide like studio secrets. I'm like, do you replace vocals and do you replace drums and which I think a lot of people kind of get like, trade secrets they don't want to, and I'm pretty open book with that. So there's a lot of aha moments with that. But also just preparation of just like, hey, don't just think this all comes down to one night. There's a whole bunch of practice and prep and thought that needs to be put in, months in advance to make that night kind of be smooth.
And so you are audio lead at Red Rocks, and it seems like you guys kind of became, extremely well known during COVID. Do you feel like there was kind of a point where the world started noticing what you guys were doing, or was it like a gradual thing that happened and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, like I'm, being asked to come give some of my secrets at Philo because people are noticing what we're doing?
Yeah, I think that's a couple different fronts. I do think it was a gradual thing, but COVID, well, where the multiple fronts come with Red Rocks Worship, I think that was a pretty good natural growth. We did Spark, and there was a album called Spark, and there was a song Breakthrough, and that was the first song that did pretty well.
Yeah.
So after that, and then that's when COVID kind of hit right shortly after that. I think 2019 is when we did that. And then COVID hit, and it was like, we had already really established a good online presence for our church. I had been mixing broadcasts already pre-COVID, for 4 or 5 years at Red Rocks.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a relatively decent following, and then COVID hit, and that just went through the roof. And we were super blessed with that, where, for a lot of churches that they were kind of catching up, and I was like, oh, we have to now focus everything online. And we were just in a spot where we had kind of covered. It was just business as usual. So that kind of added to the Red Rocks Worship, and then they released another album, and it just kind of perpetually moved on from there. So kind of both. And, the one thing that's cool about Red Rocks Worship is they're very, they're in it for Red Rocks Church.
Yeah.
And they write their music for Red Rocks Church, not so much the country or outside of Red Rocks Church. It's like, what does our church need in the moment? What do they need through COVID? How can we connect to them because they're not coming into the buildings? So they're that is on their mind as they're writing these songs.
Yeah. So for, a lot of our listeners who have heard the Red Rocks live stream and listen to your mixes, just give us a bit of overview of, what are we hearing from, the band to the point where it reaches our ears? What's sort of some of the main, workflows you have and signal flows, equipment, direction you're going there?
Yeah. So tech wise, it's pretty much exactly the same as what you hear on our Sunday broadcast. There's no really major additions when we do an album. So basically the basics, or what we call basics in the tracking world and recording world, drums and bass, are all coming through a Neve pre. It's the AMS Neve 1073 OPX. So it's Dante enabled. So it's a really straightforward pre, just a high quality pre. You can't even remote into them, so I have to go down on stage and tweak the gain. But it's drums and bass, so it doesn't move all that much once you set it and forget it. So that comes into Dante. Everything else is either Shure ULX LD, so it's already in Dante, no preamp necessary, and then the rest is just Yamaha Rios. And that makes it in Dante, and then it comes up, it's split 3 ways, front of house monitors, and then up here for broadcast to get recorded, whether that's for an album or broadcast for a weekend thing. And that's kind of it. It's super simple. It works.
And I know you mentioned you had been on a CL5 for broadcast, and then you guys made a decision to switch it up. Tell us about that.
Yes. Yeah. So my background, as we we talked about a little bit, is in the studio world, and all we use is Pro Tools. So I'm just home in Pro Tools, and when I mix albums, when I mix anything, it's all in Pro Tools. Or Pro Tools is part of the mixing process to some extent. So it was one of those things that was like, hey, I can do a lot on a CL5. I can, get the point across, but there's a lot I can't do. And if we want this thing to sound, if we want our broadcast to sound more like a live recording, there's some processes and routing things that I want to be able to do. And I can't with the CL5. So it was like, oh, well, let's switch to a DAW. Now, I originally, and the reason why we had a CL5 is I was very just reluctant to switch to a DAW purely because of reliability issues. This was back in like 2015, where it was like, I think Bethel was doing it at that point, but they had a massive system, and it was just hard. It was like hard to justify. It's like, is this going to be reliable for every weekend broadcast? Or is it going to crash on me mid broadcast? Is it going to, who knows? It's not like a digital console where they just kind of work when you turn them on for the most part. So it was kind of one of those, like when we made the switch, it was like, okay, I think we're at a point where it can be reliable if we use it reliably, if we use it in a reliable manner, and we, we're not going crazy with a bunch of plugins, and our CPU is very manageable, stuff like that. So that's what I do. And still to this day, even with M1, M2s, I'm very conscientious of where my CPU load is. So the template that I start from is like, I'm hitting like 20% CPU max, and I don't like to go above that. Yeah.
Do you guys have almost an archetype of your like target audience for the Red Rocks live stream? Are you aiming for a certain demographic or anything specific?
No, not that I know of. We're just kind of shooting it out in the world and hoping it sticks. Like I said, we try to mostly we get the temperature on how we write things and what we do, both on a church level and Red Rocks worship level, on how the church is, our local church is. We have campuses, a couple of different places around the country, but most, four out of the 6 are in Denver, and we're based out of Denver. So that's kind of our litmus test, if you will, on, what we broadcast out. Blake, and if the other people in the rest of the country, feel good about it, then awesome.
Yeah. Blake, do we have an archetype for the typical listener we're aiming for with the Church Gear podcast?
Oh, yeah. It's a person in a tech booth that basically looks like Batman, and they're running the knobs for their service while listening to us, and they're like, yes, this is a good time.
I love it when we're out at events or I go visit churches, and they will just, casually and thankfully say like, hey, I love the podcast. And I look at them and I'm like, really? You listen to it? I'm like, the first thing I do is apologize.
And then the second thing we do is I slip them a 20, and I'm like, thanks for telling Toby you like the podcast. We've never actually published an episode.
So you can just have a job.
Yeah, we've never told Toby this.
Job security.
That's right. So Jesse, you're typically mixing broadcast when you're at the church, but then you're going out on tour and you're running front of house. How does your approach change between those two environments?
They are very different. I'm a studio. I was started as a studio guy and kind of brought into the live world. So that's secondhand for me. But I love it. It has a different set of challenges, a different set of, different set of pros also. So I like it because it's a different pressure. The pressure's in like, hey, make sure the gear's set up and make sure it's solid and make sure it's going to work throughout the show. But once that's done, the payoff or the fun part for me is like, I could just mix and whatever comes down the line is whatever comes down the line. Where in the studio, you're way more hands-on. I'm like, no, it has to be good. It has to be captured good. The performance has to be good. Are we going to edit it? Are we going to tune it? Are we going to, so all those pressures just go away. And it's like, I'm just mixing whatever. If you screw up on stage, that's your deal. There's only so much I can do.
Is there almost is it almost tougher to do an in-studio thing because you can take more time? You don't have doors, threatening to open at any moment. Like, there's this principle about time and tasks that say it'll take as long as you have time to fill it, that do you almost miss the pressure and, I don't know, release that this is when we have to cut it out. Like, this is when we have to go.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's I think people on all fronts, I think they react differently under that sort of pressure, and sometimes it's for the worse and a lot of times it's for the better, some people, and I reluctantly say that I kind of do in under fire moments. I've been told that I work my best. I make the best decisions, which I really dislike that comment because it's like, I don't want to be stressed to make good decisions. You know what I mean? But I think there's a lot of people that are kind of like that, especially on stage where it's like, hey, you know what? Not everything's perfect, but we got to go. And, it forces you to kind of remember what's important about the whole night in the first place, and not focus on kind of the gear or the problems that the gear might, throw at you. Where in the studio, you can tweak for days. I think in the studio, the more you do it, the more you kind of find that line of like, okay, when am I going to call this? When am I starting to get into diminishing returns? It's like, we could overdo this forever, but we're just spinning wheels at this point. I think part of it is kind of having that good discernment of like, no, this is great. That last take was we're not going to get much better than that.
And you're in a unique position in that, you're mixing these songs in the studio and you're creating what we hear on the album, and then you're going out live and getting the exact same song. Are you trying to, essentially recreate your own mix, or do you just approach it as this is different? It's going to be a different environment and a different vibe.
Yeah, I think yes and no. I don't try to change it like crazy when I'm out live. I try to keep it the same, and I'm doing typically same type of delay throws that I do on the album, or I kind of know how to recreate them because that's what I did. I find that like live, the best way I can put it is like a studio mix to a live mix is like a live mix is like a Spark Notes version of the album song, if that makes sense, or album mix, where it's like, hey, I'm kind of boiling down this big, fancy album mix down to like, what are things I can do on the fly to recreate this? It's probably 15% of what I'm doing in the album, but it's enough to like give it the identity, or help.
Blake, were you with Dave and I when we got to tour Red Rock's Broadcast campus?
No, y'all left me at the church front conference.
Or did we leave you at the Airbnb? I feel like you were prepping the Airbnb for us to check out.
Oh, that's right. That's even worse. Y'all were like, hey, do you want to do the checkout instructions and like throw everything away and clean up our crap and we'll do a church tour? I think the trade-off was I got to sleep for 30 minutes more.
I think that was it, yeah.
I heard sleep for 30 minutes and I didn't think about the rest.
So Jesse, I was, and we talked about this before. I was very surprised walking into Red Rocks Broadcast, and I had an assumption in my head. This is another typical mega church. You're going to have a 2,500 seat auditorium. You're going to have the big line arrays and the typical stuff we see, but it's a very different vibe in there. And so what we see in the live stream, watching on YouTube, like it's shocking how shrunken down it feels in person. So kind of tell us about Broadcast Campus, and then if you're not too shy to admit it, tell us about your line array.
Yeah, we're scrappy here in Denver. We're raised in the mountains, and we can build a campfire and build a campus on a budget. Amen.
Amen.
So let's just put it this way. Red Rocks, the broadcast location, shoots really well. But if you look behind the camera, it's kind of a different story. We're basically in I think it's a 500 seater, maybe 600 if we really pack them in, dinner theater. And it used to be a dinner theater. There's a huge, professional kitchen that has been since demolished. We're in the process of making it offices, but it was a dinner theater. It still has the kind of weird metal ornate hand railings throughout. So we like it that way. We have a couple other locations that are fancier, quote unquote, or more what you might expect. And the plan was kind of when we built this, obviously that's going to be our new, main location, broadcast location. But then we did it, and it was it didn't shoot as well, or there was a pole, a support pole, a beam in the way, or something. There was always a little.
Well,
something.
I told you if you converted strip clubs into churches, you'd have all these poles in the way, Jesse.
Well, tell that to our leadership. I mean, they keep choosing these buildings.
That's a true story. There is a church we picked up from that was a converted strip club, and I was like, oh,
was it in L.A.?
No, it was in Alabama.
Oh, all right.
Sorry, Jesse. I had to.
Redeeming sinful spots for the the gospel.
Does that mean they're going to have to turn Church Gear headquarters into a church to redeem this spot?
100%, especially if you're here, Blake.
All right, Jesse. Sorry for the bunny trail. Continue though on why it did.
Use strip poles there. We can buy.
Oh my gosh.
We've got a lot of tripods.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Okay.
Let's get back to why they didn't switch broadcast locations.
Yeah. So because it just didn't have charm. It didn't feel like home, and it was new and pretty and cool, but it didn't feel right. So we have stayed here, and we love it here, and it has a vibe, and we like it, and it shoots well. So win-win. I also think it's a lot easier to control sound. I don't think, I know it's a lot easier to control sound in a smaller location. So if you're throwing sound out to a 2,500, 3,000 seater venue, it's a lot harder to kind of control it and make it not just reflect everywhere. Where in our nice little building, it kind of sounds like a studio, a live studio. Our PA, I'm not avoiding this question.
Show us your PA.
Show us your PA. Send PA pics.
That's a shirt. That's a shirt.
So it is it's a Frankenstein. So we originally
I haven't heard of the Frankenstein model.
Yeah.
We originally started in a location that's kind of more towards the mountains called Golden. And this is the PA, this is the first PA that the church ever purchased. And it's a mini compass. I think there's seven boxes per side. And then if you're familiar with mini compass, they're not the best. They're kind of the first line array you get into in the professional world. Barely. They're just out of Guitar Center's scope of PAs.
Yeah.
But just out of the catalog. And they have a lot of hyped high end, but not a lot of low end. So because of that, then we had a local guy named Dowlin. He made his own sub to dual 18s. So I have 4 of those. And they work, but are they as efficient as others? Absolutely not. And then, so you have those, and those are only covering from 60 basically and below. And the tops are basically, they feel like they're like 150 and above. So you have this big hole from 60 to 150. So then we added a Nexo low mid box. So you have 3 different PA speakers in our PA.
So all the audio purists out there are,
Cringing.
horrified.
Yes.
And how does it actually sound is the proof in the pudding.
I actually really like how it sounds. Here's the thing. Here's my theory with PAs. When you reach a certain point, and that point is, I think, lower than a lot of people want to believe it is. But if you can take a speaker on a pole, speaking of poles, but a speaker on a stick, right? If you can take that and play Spotify out of it and it sounds pretty darn good, then there is no reason why your mix can't sound equally that good out of a speaker on a pole, right? So that theory applies all the way up to the nicer, bigger PAs. So I think our room sounds pretty good because it's more about the mix than it is about the box, as long as the box is working correctly.
Take that, D&B.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that's like, however, if you are trying to fill a 3,000 seater venue, that's where those nice bigger boxes really, really help you because they can throw sound more correctly. And they that's where those cheaper systems kind of fall apart.
And D&B, if you want us to leave that nice thing he said about you in the podcast, you have to send me, Jesse, and Toby one for our basement.
That's right. Then I'll take back everything I just said.
That's right.
I'm not a sellout, guys. I promise. But no, I think because our room is kind of small and contained, it's easy to get a decent sound in there. You don't need these big fancy arrays to project correctly.
And I know myself and I'll admit a former audio guy, like it's tempting to want just more and more and more toys and then to get used to like, hey, I can't create a mix without, my rack of gear or my 78 plugins. Like, do you have a philosophy on creating a great mix, without all the toys?
Yeah. I think they are synonymous. I think a simple mix will get you to a better mix 90% of the time. I think an overcomplicated mix is just that, and I don't think the benefits outweigh. I think it's like get a good source, mic it decently, and you don't have to do much to it. If you have an EQ, a compressor, and a de-esser on every channel, and some verb and delay, you're like, you should be golden. You really should. It's where you get into these super fancy, like multi-band this and sidechain this and yada, yada, yada. Now, are there moments for that? For sure. But does it mean, is it going to, can you get a good mix without all that? Absolutely. They did that 10 years ago. There's great mixes and they'd never had multi-band or very limited versions of multi-band.
And
that's the multi-band. Sorry, just kidding. I use multi-bands all the time too. So,
and especially if you put it on a pole, then it really helps.
Yeah, 100% multi-pole.
Now, with 15 years of studio experience, you've been at Red Rocks for quite a few years now as well. How are you passing on your skills and your knowledge to the next generation? How are you raising up young leaders and young audio professionals?
I think that's super important for everybody in any position. I'm sure there's famous quotes and books and all sorts of stuff that I'm just not smart enough to know of. But I think it's the duty of someone that's reaching not the end. I'm aging myself. Man, I'm talking myself into a hole right now.
This is such a morbid episode. Jesse's at the end. We talked about Toby being at the end.
Being in the middle.
That test, and it's in a few years, so I got some training to do. No, but I think when you get decent at something, I think it's part of your duty. Part of that is to train the next person or train somebody else. Because in turn, makes you better. Makes you better at your skill, not just at teaching. So what am I doing? We have our different locations. So that's technically my position is broadcast. And then I oversee all the front of house at all the Red Rocks locations. So, spending time with them and training and like, hey, think of it this way and try this, you have this problem here, try to throw this at it. Stuff like that. But more than what I can tell them a lot of times, it's like, man, just get in there and do it. Just train your ear, practice and repetition, just over and over and over. The best way to learn how to mix is to mix. And that's really the best training. There's a couple things that I'll say that I think will really kind of focus their trajectory a little bit better, or, ways that they can think about it so they're not kind of going down a dead end. But other than that, the best way to practice is to practice. Kind of redundant, but
yeah. Blake, have you gotten back in the tech booth at the youth group recently?
No, I was so scared I had to burn that whole building down. It was the annex, so they didn't miss it too bad.
Yeah, I was just thinking, if you're ever going to advance in your audio and production skills, Blake, you're just going to have to practice.
Look, my boys are turning sophomores this year. Started with them when they were 7th graders. When they graduate, that will be the looming question. Do I restart in youth or do I join the AVL team at Fellowship?
Golly, which department, is less likely to burn to the ground?
They're not going to take me. They're going to be like, get out of here. Go away.
You've done enough damage.
They're going to say, Blake, if you were in the tech booth, it'd be a disaster. Jesse, speaking of disasters, we love a good disaster story here on the podcast. So tell us about a moment when everything went wrong and how you recovered and explained it to leadership, or when it almost went wrong, but you held it together at the last second.
Oh.
You put those Terminator glasses on and powered through.
I just got to work.
You said, take me to the chopper.
I'm not even going to attempt the accent. So let's see. Disaster story. Well, this one isn't really a disaster. It was easily perceived as a disaster, but it ended up not being. So we did a worship night in South Texas with Red Rocks Worship, and it was kind of the first time we had gone outside of our church, and it was done a quote unquote tour. But it was a small town in way southern Texas. And there's a church, awesome church. And I want to be careful because I don't want to like dog on what they have, but they had their stuff needed some help. Right. So they had wireless issues. There was constant dropouts and cuts. And we didn't travel with any of our gear, so we were using everything of theirs. So we show up, and the other thing is, it's really hard. And I had to learn this the hard way. It's really hard to come from like a building with even a decent system, and then go and mix in a room that doesn't have a decent system because you want it to be that. So you kind of push things maybe farther than you should. But anyway, we're there. They had basically two point source speakers that are, I don't know, not the biggest thing in the world. And we're doing the thing. I'm trying to navigate all these wireless dropouts as we're doing it, and boom, all the low end goes away. And our tour manager at the time was kind of standing right next to me, and his name's Matt Woodson. He's still tour manager around Nashville, actually. He steps in, he's like, bro, I got it. Go do what you got to do. So he took over the mixing console. I run backstage to see what I blew, because I'm like, oh no, we're probably going to have to buy a new system for this church now.
That bad. That's okay.
Those are the things that are going in my head.
It's like, oh man, I'm going to have to go to churchgear.com and buy a whole new system.
Yeah. Toby, I got a favor to ask you.
Yep.
Also, can I sell you all this gear I just destroyed? I swear it's good.
So go back there, and they had an amp rack, and sure enough, the sub amp, and they had a 3-way system, so it wasn't like a line array with separate subs. It was just tops, mids, subs out of one speaker. So they had an amp for each of those. And sure enough, the sub amp or the low amp was powered off. So I'm digging around, and they had it in a rack that was locked, like a server rack that was locked. And then there was like a bunch of props and weird stuff you see backstage at churches piled in front of it. So we pull all that stuff away, and then it's locked, and nobody has the key, of course. The lead pastor, he's back there. He comes up. I think he was like eating something, which was kind of funny, but he comes up and he's like, so, am I going to have to buy a new amp? Because he's like eating, and I'm like just stressed. I'm like, dude, I don't know. Do you have the key to this thing? He's like, I haven't been in there. I haven't ever opened that door. So
there's just a dead raccoon.
Yeah. Yeah. So we pull the amp out, or pull the rack out to get to the back. And long story short, it was a power sequencer. So it was like an outlet that was tied to a sequencer. And that outlet, the sequencer part of it, blew on the outlet. So the amp didn't blow. The breaker didn't blow either. It was literally just the sequencer outlet. So it was literally, I pulled it, finally got back, pulled it out of that, plugged it straight into the wall, and it worked fine. But the funny thing is when I was doing that, it was like sparking. So I could have, got shocked and died. But you know what? We made it through, got it back in. Meanwhile, the worship team is like, all right, what do we got to do? There's a piano, we got an acoustic guitar, we'll do an acoustic set. But we got it up and running. And then it was like, oh, we don't have to buy this church a PA. And we're good. So I go back up front of house, and then it's just like a litany of wireless cutouts after that the rest of the night. But this is a redeeming story, because at the end, or not even at the end, that crowd in there was the most hyped crowd that we, to this day, really have ever seen. They were just so in it, ready to worship, ready to meet the Lord. It was like, whoa. So it's just one of those things that, like, in our position, in the tech position, that's a stressful day. That's a hard day. But, the stories, I think, is important for me and hopefully for you guys, because it just goes to show you that it doesn't matter what problems are happening in the tech world. When he wants to move, the room moves.
Yeah, that's great. When I used to lead worship, there was one church we would lead at in Texas. I'm highly doubting it's the same church, because this one was in Waco, but it was kind of a Pentecostal church. And it was like the first chord played out, and like the crowd was into it and singing and dancing and clapping. It's like they hardly even needed us to be there, because the Spirit was moving so much. And so I love those environments where it's like, just do your thing, and like, the Spirit's already working in here, so it'll be good.
Yeah. And a little testament is like, and not to breed mediocrity, but usually people and audiences like little mishaps like that. Like, it fuels them. They're like, oh, you guys are human. You're not on this pedestal. You're real, and you have issues and struggles like all of us do. Yeah. So they kind of, it invites them in even more so than maybe if everything was perfect.
I'm still going to advocate for the once a year planned tech fail, where you just make all the stuff go off, because people always remember those. They always say, like, that was when, like, we really, just had the acoustic guitar and it went great. Like,
it is. It's like, hey, remember that time where the power went out and we all like lit some candles and like sang around the campfire? That was amazing. It's like, yeah.
It's also a good reminder of the production leaders that are there fixing those problems, because, the average person is just going to forget that, yes, somebody is running this entire spaceship every week. It doesn't just self-regulate itself. It has many talented people surrounding us making this all happen. So I think that's good reminders.
Mm-hmm.
Jesse, we'd like to wrap all of our episodes with a tech takeaway. You kind of just gave a backdoor into one, so now we're going to get greedy and ask for a second. So, man, what would you say to a room full of production people to make their Sundays better?
Let's see. Make their Sundays better. Your lead pastors might not like this advice, but my uncle always told me this. Don't sweat the small stuff. It's all small stuff.
That's a pretty good riff on Toby's It'll Be Fine.
Yeah. It's been fine so far, Blake.
Has it
Yeah.
though, Toby?
I did hire you.
The following Sunday will come, regardless of what happens this Sunday.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
I like it.
Jesse, that's really good, man. Well, we appreciate you coming on. Is there anything you want to plug? Anywhere you want to point people towards?
Yeah, just follow me on Instagram. It's _mixing_guy, I believe. I haven't actually looked in a long
That's
time.
a pretty great
Appreciate that.
handle you snagged.
Yeah. I'm always posting little tips and little stupid things. I have a hard time separating family from like the professional life. So you'll see some pictures of my kids every once in a while. Don't get creepy with it. But you'll also see a lot of audio, like just kind of cool little tips and tricks and things that I'm doing and things that I'm thinking of. So
That's cool, man.
that's it.
We'll follow Jesse over there on Instagram and hit him up. Hit him up for some advice. Well, thanks for joining
And
us.
thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. This is fun.
Yeah.
Hey, listeners. We're introducing a segment called Church Tech Confessionals. This is a time for any church tech to anonymously confess the worst thing they've ever done in church production. Here's one now.
So recently, I started working at the church, and my first Easter this year, I slept in. That was the first time I've slept in, and it was probably the worst Sunday ever. I woke up an hour late to my boss calling me. Not a good Sunday.
Hey, if you have your own 3 to 5 minute church tech confessional, record it and send it to podcast@churchgear.com. And don't worry, we'll apply a voice changer and you'll be 100% anonymous. Your pastor will never know.
Thanks for hanging out with us. We hope to see you back next week for more absurd stories, tech takeaways, and overall buffoonery here at the Church Gear Studios.
Okay, Blake, so I feel like, Jesse just said a phrase that you've heard over and over and over again. So when somebody's explaining what's about to happen and then they say, but Blake, don't get creepy with it.
Yeah, but then I'm like, what is this employee handbook? Wait, why do I have an HR meeting on my calendar? What do you mean I need to hire a lawyer?
Yeah, and if the audience actually knew that before this episode, you were seriously trying to get me to allow you to sign a waiver so you can be inappropriate at church gear?
We got a new HR addition to our handbook. I said, this is so unfun. Can a couple of us sign a thing to like a group? We opt out of it so we can still have fun together at work. We all have those people in our lives that we're really close with. And whoever that person is for you, send them this episode. Text it to them and be like, hey, man, I'd like to sign away all my HR rights. Listen to this episode and we can make jokes about it.
But don't get creepy with it.